there's no clubs, there's no study groups. I paid for all of that. I paid for the library. I paid for my common areas where I'm studying and watching The Bachelor and whatever it is, and that isn't there anymore. On top of the fact that me and a whole bunch of my friends got jobs around campus thinking that we'd be there up until June. And then people had to quit their jobs and they lose their jobs and they also have nowhere to live to accommodate that, which is not as big of an issue for me, but a lot of people I do know got kicked out of housing and lost their job and had nothing to go back to.
Wow.
Yeah.
What will you do when your money works for you? Welcome to the Tech Girl Financial Podcast with your hosts, Victor and Kim Gaxiola. From the home office in California, here is Victor and Kim.
Welcome back to the Tech Girl Financial Podcast. And today we are actually doing a follow-up to the last podcast that was recorded when we asked the big question, will schools reopen this fall? And talked about the future of college education. And so joining us today, we brought in a current college student, our intern, and you've heard her in the podcast before, Ava Silva, so welcome back.
Hi, thank you.
And we talked a lot about Mika, and we thought, well, it would be fair to have her on the podcast as well. So Mika, our daughter, senior in high school right now, who is thinking about what to do next year, joining us as well.
She's going to represent herself.
Yeah, we won't put words in her mouth. All right, so I think the first question I just wanted to ask in general, and we'll start with you, Ava, is how are you feeling about your college education experience right now?
It's not what I expected for my first year, that's for sure. In some ways, I feel like it kind of got ripped away because spring quarter or spring semester is really when you start to get a rhythm and you find friends and you find kind of where you belong on campus. And right when I kind of started feeling like, okay, this is where I am for 4 years, I got sent back home. So I think that's the hardest part, really, is just being away from the immersion when you weren't immersed to begin with.
Mm.
Yeah. Now you happen to live close to the school that you were going to. So tell me, are other students around here, or did they all end up, going back home and home is far away, or are you still talking to them? And
yeah, so I'm still talking to all of my friends that I had on campus. The closest, like my best friends, one is in Los Gatos and one is in Almaden. And then I also have really good friends in Nicaragua. So it's very, very different. A lot of my Latina friends are from Nicaragua and Panama. So that's been a little hard. Just because now they're speaking Spanish at home so much that our communication gets a little different. And I'm minoring in Spanish, but, it's not going that great yet. It's still my first year, so that's probably been hard. But most of my friends are in California or they're completely far away in a different country.
Mm-hmm. And just to be clear, this is your first year in college,
this
right?
is my first year.
So you don't really have a way of comparing it to, what the spring quarter semester would have been like because you haven't had one.
Yeah, exactly. There's not much comparison.
So what changed? Can you walk us through the process? I mean, we know that a lot of campuses decided just to go into an online experience. Walk us through, from a timeline perspective, what happened to you at Santa Clara?
Yeah, so we had spring break, and then we came back for about a week, and everyone was saying that they didn't think we would have to go home. And then the next day we got sent home pretty much immediately. It was supposed to be for 2 weeks. Within those 2 weeks, we got emails that if we can come back to campus, we should remove all of our stuff from our dorms so we don't have to come back. And that's when everything got moved online permanently. So that's, for me, looked different because it's been over the course of 2 quarters. So I finished winter quarter with finals online, which was extremely difficult because it gave us 1 week notice. And then I went into spring quarter now, which I'm in until June, completely online. Most of it's asynchronous. We have a couple Zoom classes, but for the most part, it's doing everything alone, which is difficult, especially for Spanish and business classes, because it really requires like networking and speaking, and you're sitting in Zoom if there's that class and it's too awkward to talk because there's 30 people in there and no one wants to cut anyone off. Mm-hmm. So really any human connection has been almost halted. And for my major in business and minor in Spanish, that's so necessary.
Right. Well, and I know that, Mika has also been taking classes online at Sobrato, and you obviously have been taking them online at Santa Clara. I'm curious, and this is more out of my curiosity, are you finding that there might be some benefit? I mean, are you learning something through this experience that you may not have learned if you were actually going to school? I'm looking for the silver lining here. So I'll ask the question of the two of you.
I think for me, the benefit is definitely being able to do my work whenever I want. I don't have to worry too much about doing it in the morning because I'm not a morning person, but when I work best is at night, so I get more flexibility with my schedule and being able to do it whenever.
That doesn't sound too different than when you're going to school because you were always doing your homework at night.
Well, yeah, but...
Yeah, in college, your schedule you choose. So I guess it's been different. Like, I had classes in the afternoon, I had them in the morning, so it didn't alter it all that much because I still have my class times and I still do homework in the middle of the day and at night. I guess the benefit is I'm a better thinker alone. I don't like group projects all that much, especially when I was taking calculus. It really frustrated me. So now I've completely not had to do that. I can write an essay alone and I can do my projects alone and on my own schedule. So that's nice. That's probably the benefit.
Have you discovered, and I'll take to Ava, this question is so much of the experience, in college is the social aspect of it, the interactions and such. And it sounds like you're trying to maintain as much as you can through these mediums. But have you discovered that is a big part of the experience, from the standpoint of not being able to be there physically?
Yeah, in high school as a senior, I didn't realize how important it would be. I'd be like, I'll be fine if I'm an outcast. I'm not worried about it. But really, the whole dynamic of college is interpersonal. You need to make networking connections because that's what you need outside of college. That's what you need when, for example, I'm super great at math. I am not an English person, and I have to take English and write all these essays for 4 years. You need to have a friend that can I'm not saying cheat. That's not what I'm saying. But, I have a really great friend, and she's an English minor, and I always have a habit of, going off in a tangent. And she's really good at reading my essays and being like, okay, highlighted this area. This has nothing to do with it. Fix it. And then I've been able to learn new things, and then I've helped her with math, and she's learning new things, and that's something you don't get if you don't have people around you just academically.
Yeah, and the reason why I was asking that question, and Mika, I'm curious about yours, but yours we're paying through taxes. They're paying tuition, right? And so a big part of this is that a lot of the administrators, or at least in the things that I've been reading about colleges that are offering, the instruction continues to be offered online, is they're saying, well, look, they're still getting the same level of instruction. And I think the big pushback there is, yeah, but that's just a certain portion of what we're paying tuition for. It's not just for the education component. Right. It's the experience.
Right. Yeah.
So do you think you should be getting a discount? I mean...
Yes, I do. Okay, yeah. So I think my education is very similar. I'd say maybe 40% of my college experience is sitting in the classroom, though, because it's working in the library and having office hours, which now completely conflict with my class times, and I can't see someone around campus for dinner or lunch like I did before. And there's no clubs, there's no study groups. I paid for all of that. I paid for the library. I paid for my common areas where I'm studying and watching The Bachelor and whatever it is, and that isn't there anymore. On top of the fact that me and a whole bunch of my friends got jobs around campus thinking that we'd be there up until June. And then people had to quit their jobs and they lose their jobs and they also have nowhere to live to accommodate that, which is not as big of an issue for me, but a lot of people I do know got kicked out of housing and lost their job and had nothing to go back to.
Wow.
Yeah.
The last podcast, we focused quite a bit in probably making some assumptions, Mika, about your own, anticipation of school. And we talked about how you've made the decision to defer for a year or to at least stay at home just because of the uncertainty of whether or not classes will actually be opening up in the fall. And since the last recording of the podcast to now, the California State University system made the decision that they were actually going to have the fall semester or quarter be completely online. So they made that decision for all of the students, faculty, and staff. And we're not talking about a small amount of numbers of students. They have close to 500,000 or 500,000 students. So not to put words in your mouth and such, but can you share, Mika, what are your thoughts about the whole college experience and, what you're thinking about when it comes to taking advantage of this gap year?
I definitely think it's really sad for most of my friends who were looking forward to all those experiences in the freshman year and everything that, we've been looking forward to for the past 4 years in high school. But it does make me more comfortable in my decision, whereas in the beginning, I was a little less comfortable with it because I was thinking, oh, I'm missing all of this stuff. I'm not nobody's going to be here. I'm going to be by myself. It was more harder to wrap my head around the decision I made. Even though I knew it was the right one, it just didn't feel like what I was meant to do or what I wanted to do. It's not where I saw myself going. Mm-hmm. But it does make me more comfortable, I think, now that in my decision because of the fact that a lot of people are going to be spending all that tuition and they're going to be spending all that money. And I'm just going to be here. And working and saving money. So,
well, it's interesting just because the whole idea of the gap year, as we had mentioned, and especially in other parts of the world, is actually quite common, to take a year between high school and actually university, to take a year. Most of the time what they'll do is they'll travel during that time, or perhaps they'll get a job and get some work experience. And what I've seen more and more in the last couple of weeks, especially as some of these campuses have been announcing moving towards an online offering only in the fall, that the consideration of actually doing a gap year and deferral is becoming more and more popular. So the big question is, what's that going to mean if you're a junior in high school right now? If you have any friends that are juniors, are they going to be competing with all these people who deferred or competing with all the people who decided to take gap years? So it'll be really interesting. Whereas we know that the enrollments are likely to be down this fall of 2020, what's it going to look like in the fall of 2021?
That's a question we will just have to wait and see, right?
Cross that bridge when we get to it.
Okay, since we have you both here, Ava and Mika, I want to ask Ava, since she has more experience here, if you were able to have a gap year prior to going off to college, what are the things now being in college that maybe you would have liked to do if this was different?
Yeah. Well, if I had a gap year, I'd probably want to travel to a Spanish-speaking company just because one of my goals is to be bilingual, but I guess that's inhibited right now. So if travel wasn't an issue, then I would definitely use it as a time to be immersed in whatever I was interested in my case, Spanish. But if you're interested in, music, then go to Nashville if it's country and explore, because when you're young, I think it's the best time to do things because you have the least amount of risk. Your parents, for the most part, will always have a roof over your head if things really don't work out. So really, if you're thinking about a gap year, which if I were in Mika's position, I will say right now I would take a gap year, or I'd be at Gavilan, our community college, because really the units transfer the same no matter where you go. Take the gap year, get your units, enjoy life, and then go into whatever university you feel fit, whether that's private and $60,000 a year or public and $7,000 a year. If it's your right fit, it's your right fit, and it shouldn't matter about anything else.
That's good advice.
Mm-hmm. That is good advice. Is there anything she should be looking at in terms of, now we're in the situation that maybe she takes a class at a junior college or not? What is the difference between all of the junior colleges here, and what should she be aware of in terms of how those credits may transfer.
So obviously I'm not in a junior college, but my boyfriend is, and he's paying for that himself, and I have been helping, so I see that perspective. A great benefit of junior colleges around us is that they're on semester systems. So if they transfer, then you will for sure get all of your credit at a school that runs on semesters. And if you go to a school with quarters like Santa Clara or the UCs, you're actually going to get more credits because a semester is 16 weeks versus 10. So as for units, you don't have to worry all that much in California, especially where we are up north, and even in SoCal, I think it's the same. So that's really great because I know units are a big problem if you're going from, say, a CSU to a private school, you're really behind. But junior college is really great about making sure your units will transfer.
That's all really good. Thank you, Ava. So I wanted to go back to something that Mika had said earlier, and that was that, in choosing to do a deferral or choosing, to take a gap year, that part of the concern was this idea of, the fear of missing out, the FOMO of other friends who have made a commitment to go to a 4-year school, or whether it's local or what have you. And now, as more and more of these organizations and schools are moving towards an online experience, it's almost like the opposite and saying, well, they're missing out now because their experience is not going to be optimal. I mean, you look so forward to going to college, and then, the tail end of her senior year is going to look not all that different really in the fall semester of the college year if everything's online. I mean, Zoom call in college isn't going to be too different than maybe a Zoom call in high school, with the exception of maybe the subject matter and the number of people that are involved. So, and not to put you on the spot, so what are you going to do then in your gap year? What do you look forward to tackling? And now that you have this time, and as Ava said, even if you can't travel, what are you going to do?
I think that the gap year now, since people are going to be staying home and doing the Zoom calls for their colleges, I think it's only going to help me because it's like they're going to be stuck in class, but I can work. Like, I can go build a portfolio. I can go out and get jobs. And obviously, and if I was in a different situation and if I was taking this gap year and everything was normal, I definitely would want to travel. So it is kind of sad that I can't travel, but it just allows for more time to just go out and get my hands dirty in the work field, go figure things out, and then take all that knowledge and experience and then apply it to classroom setting when I get back into school.
That's so funny because I always thought when I was in college that those people that were older than me always knew so much more than I did. And it kind of bothered me in a little bit. And now I'm like, oh, yeah, that all makes sense because I don't think I understood my major, which was economics, until I started working in business and in financial markets. And then now it just seems so easy. But that is an advantage of, since you will be able to work in your field to get that time, so that when you actually do go into classes, it will be reinforced stronger.
Well, there's also that what we've talked about is that the gap year is going to provide you with some opportunities for experimentation because, as part of your graduation, we did purchase some equipment for you to kind of have your own in-home recording studio, which will give you more practical opportunities to try out the craft before you get to the school part of it, which is more theoretical. So, what are you hoping to gain, in the year from a technical perspective, by having access to these tools?
I think that this year will definitely help me because within the past couple of years, I've been very stressed about finding time because of school and cheering, like all of these clubs and activities that I'm a part of. The music part and the stuff that I really want to hone in and like kind of just focus on has always been something that I never had time for. And so now without not having those other priorities be a problem anymore because they were more just like in my high school years, and getting all the time I can have to just focus on the music part, I think it'll help me a lot more because it is something I've been wanting to do for a long time. It's just I never found those open spots, and now my whole year is just an open spot for me to explore and learn. So I'm excited.
Well, that's good.
And that's something that, I think one of the important things and one of the things that I worry about as a parent is to say, you have this opportunity to take this gap year and get back time, which you haven't had because of everything that you were doing with school. And so one of the things I think is really important is to set some goals. So when summer starts, have some goals of what you want to accomplish in this gap year, and then break them down so you know that you are achieving them over time. And I think as a parent, if you're listening to this conversation, that, a year can fly by and you don't even know what happened to it, especially when you graduate. The older you get, that happens. And so I think the important thing, again, is just make a list of the things you want to do, create goals, and prioritize those, and make sure that that comes true.
Yeah. And one thing that I'll share is I remember when I first started working after college, and then it doesn't take long. Once you start working, you do one job, you work there, you get the experience, and then you move to the next job and such. And I remember that after having been working now for maybe about 5 or 6 years, thinking back on my college years, I thought that was like the best time ever,
Yep.
and I remember kind of rushing into it. Like, what was the rush to not only get to college, but then once I was in college to get out, to start a career. So you look at a career, and assuming that, let's say you're in your mid-20s when you get started with your career and you work all the way into your 60s or 70s, in a big grand scheme of things, that 1 year out of a career that is 30, 40, 50 years long, depending on what you choose, is really not a big deal. And so for me, it was almost like, who wouldn't want the opportunity to slow down?
Right.
You just completed 12 years plus of school. Yes, the prescription for most people is right after that you go into college. But how can you, take advantage of this year? Take this as an opportunity, right? And I think that one of the conversations that, Kim and I have had is, when it comes to job, you're looking for jobs that will have job security. And a lot of that was based on a recession-proof career. And now you've got this extra layer. What would be a pandemic-proof, career? And I'm curious as to whether or not there's any conversations about that, Ava, at Santa Clara or with other people. Do you think there are going to be students and people that, that might change their major or career choice based on this experience?
I can't say, just because I'm in a situation where we're all very early into our majors, and it's changing all the time. I have a friend who has changed her major this year 7 times. And I want to remind you, I was in school from the end of September until Easter, and then we were off campus for a month. So within a 4 or 5 month period, that major changed 7 times. So everyone's changing. I think a lot more people will probably go into business, just because Santa Clara always uses the business school as, if you go into this, you're gonna have a job right out of college, you're gonna be set. So I think just because that's what they say, a lot more people will feel safe after the scare of this. Mm-hmm. But to be honest, I'm not sure any college career is pandemic proof. I think that the pandemic proof jobs are the people who are in agriculture, in customer service, really just anything that's absolutely essential, right? Essential employees, and people who are working at coffee shops never thought they would be, but here they are, literally keeping up the backbone of this economy. Yeah. So I don't think we can predict it, and I'm not sure a college degree is pandemic proof.
That's so interesting, right? And it's true. Who would have thought that a healthcare crisis would have stopped doctors from working, dentists from working, a lot of healthcare. I went to Kaiser the other day, and it was a ghost town. No joke. And you think, wow, this is supposed to be a recession-proof job. And so a lot of things have changed, which is interesting. And here we are still in financial services, thankfully working, right? So it does kind of make you think, what is essential? Okay, so, well, Mika and Ava, we could probably talk forever about these things. And maybe we have just made our listeners think of more questions as they're hearing from both of you. And so it's really important for our listeners to know that, you're not alone in the questions that you and your students are having about what to do, whether to return to the university that they were attending in the fall or to take a year off and just go to junior college. How do you get units at a cheaper cost or whatever it is you are thinking about? It's not easy, and there are a lot of things that you have to think about before doing any of these, because it may infringe on your merit packages or financial aid, scholarships, what have you. So we are always available for, our clients to be a sounding board for you and to point you in the right direction, because there is a lot of information now, a lot of articles talking about all of these topics now. And, I like to think that I'm collecting all of this information for me, for my family and friends, and of course, clients as well.
Yeah, and I would echo exactly all of what Kim just said. I think that what's important is, especially when you're looking at making an investment, which is what I see the college experience being, an investment, and in some cases, especially if you're attending a private university, it can be a very expensive one, that you want to make sure that you're getting and you're making an informed choice and that you're considering your options. And we know that there's a lot of uncertainty right now. So whether you're currently in school or thinking about going to a school and you've run the numbers and you know what you can afford, you have to think about the entire experience more than just the education, more than just the degree. And so it is having a deep network or a deep roster of people to talk to. And as Kim said, we are certainly here to help have those conversations, because we ourselves are going through this in the evaluation of the schools that are going to make the most sense for Mika. So I would want to take this opportunity once again to thank Ava. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And to thank Mika for your perspective. And we can't wait to hear what you're going to be producing in your home studio upstairs in your bedroom.
Me too.
So this is, again, the Tech Girl Financial Podcast. We want to thank you again for listening. You can always reach out to us by sending an email, and all the contact information, which usually accompanies the show notes of every podcast that we do. And then at the same time, we encourage you, as Mika says in her recording at the end there, to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and all the different social media. So stay safe, stay kind, bear hugs later.
If you have questions, comments, or suggestions for future shows, please send an email to victor@techgirlfinancial.com or join the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag AskTGF. We also encourage you to follow us on the Tech Girl Financial page on Facebook and connect with us on LinkedIn.
Securities offered through registered representatives of Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer member FINRA, SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Tech Girl Financial and Cambridge Investment Research, Inc. are not affiliated companies.